Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Andy Thomas from Black Crown Initiate to talk about their latest album, upcoming album, Violent Portraits of Doom Escape, out August 7th on Century Media. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I mean, the world is a crazy place right now, but I'm hanging in. I'm excited to get the album out for sure.
And the first question that I have to ask you is this to me was a very complex and layered album. Where was your starting point? Like, where did you guys started when you have so many different moving pieces on this record?
Man, that's a tough question because it was started what feels like so long ago now. I think I want to say we started writing in 2017. It would have been 2017. And I think it was just, I think I just had like little pieces. I had little riffs. I think I had the intro riff to Years in Frigid Light. I think I had the intro riff to Death Comes in Reverse. But I just had little pieces, and like always, those little pieces kind of I get together with Nick, and then we develop them into whole songs. Hopefully, sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but that's where that started. Just little pieces, and the next thing we know, we have a whole album. But we didn't. I don't know if any of the questions involve this, so maybe I shouldn't go too far into it. But we didn't, or yet, but we didn't really know we were team, no label. So it was very much just let's write music because we enjoy it.
From a creative standpoint, did you guys take any new challenges, take any new directions when you were putting this album together, or do you feel like by now you guys have a tried and true path and you stick to it?
Well, every album for us is sort of something new because we don't really do things when we write. I can't say for sure in other bands, but I feel like other bands might go, where they might go. This is a part of our sound. If this is not a part of our sounds, we can't use it or whatever. We don't do so because life changes, your music tastes change. Hopefully, you grow and whatever else. When there's what might be considered a new part of our sound or whatever, we don't really even think of it as such. It's just that was cool, and it's always been that way. So we're not really looking at it as like new things. It's what's happening when we write.
One of the key interesting aspects of this new album, at least for me, from my perspective, was the overall structure of the album. It felt that it was divided into these two parallel universes, the yin and the yang, almost like a butterfly effect from the first half of the record to the second half of the record. Is that how you see the record? Is that the concept that you guys had in mind when you put the album together?
Well, as with a lot of things or as with everything that I've done, lyrically at least, it's very cyclical conceptually. So the album very much tells a story. I don't really, I would prefer that people kind of came to their own conclusions of that. But for me, it definitely tells a linear story, and the concept to that story is sort of infinitely cyclical. So yeah, I was saying there's a linear story that's being told, but it's sort of infinitely cyclical. So I don't know that I necessarily intended for there to be two halves of the album, but it definitely works out that way with it's kind of interesting. Sometimes feels difficult to uh, arrange the tracks in the order that in an order that makes the most sense. Like sometimes that it takes time to get there, but with this album, it was just that's the way it goes, and it was immediately apparent. I mean, plus with like I said, I was telling a story.
Yeah, when you're telling a story, that kind of limits what you can do as far as the track listing is concerned, because obviously we're not talking about Star Wars here, so you're not going to start like in the middle and then go to the future and then move to the past, and you know, like you have to have some sort of a process to it. I just felt in terms of the emotion that the tracks had and how the album was constructed, that it definitely gave me a vibe of a sequence, but it gave me a vibe of two different worlds from the same point of view. If I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say, like it's the same point of view. It's just that it feels like the views in the first half of the album come full circle in a different perspective in the second half of the album. So that's why I was saying that it has these two different worlds.
I think that's really awesome that you took the time to even think about that. I think that's a very cool thing.
I think it's part of the listening experience. I mean, listening to this album, I was really taken back by how layered, how intricate, how complex, how dynamic it was, and you kind of get lost into it. It's an album that you could easily lose yourself within the listening experience of the record, but it's also one of those records that I felt the more I listened to it, the more I discover about the album, and the more engaged I became with the record itself.
Well, to be completely honest with you, my favorite albums of all time are the ones that do exactly that, and I that's really that makes me feel good that you listen to it and get that, because that's the goal.
Well, if that's the goal, you guys definitely you hit the nail on the head with this record. It's just magnificently done. I actually wondered at the end of the record, I was like, how do you create this album to be this way? Because to me, it seems such a complex body of work. It's such a living organism of an album that me personally, I just don't have it in me to even know where do I start. How do I put things together? How do I give the album the soul and the heartbeat that it has?
Tiny pieces, man. That's like you just because I mean, you know, to make something like, because I mean that's there's a lot of, and tiny pieces, but it's so Nick and I have so much fun writing music together, and I am so sort of passionate about the lyrical content and the vocal content and all that stuff. It's really fun. Yeah, I mean that's the main point is the way we do that, the way we make an album like that is you start very small and you have a lot of fun writing it, and you get to watch little ideas turn into songs, and then you get to record them with professionals like Carson and Grant, and you get to hear it become this huge thing. It's really cool. It's the best thing in life.
I have to ask you. There's a couple of songs that I really have to ask you about it, and perhaps the one that the one that I when I listen to the album, and even now when I play the album over and over again, this song just hit me really hard because I wasn't expecting a track like that, and that's Below. How how do you guys came to that track, and you guys place it in the middle of the record? It really breaks the album, but it has such an interesting dynamic in the overall flow of the record, but in the song itself. I was personally, I was expecting maybe you guys would go with an instrumental track on that spot, and instead of an instrumental track, you guys went with a vocal grunting track there. How did that come about?
Well, over the years, it's been really sort of an honor and a pleasure to develop vocally beside James, uh, because he's really good at what he does, and you know I've known him for so long that you know I've sort of watched him become, you know, what you hear on the new album, and I think his vocal performance on the new album is incredible. Um, but basically, he he was showing me how he was working on, because he does throat singing and stuff, and he was showing me how he figured out how to do the polyphonic singing where multiple tones come out, but while he's screaming. And I just I thought that would be I enjoy like Tibetan monks chanting and stuff. I actually own albums that are that. Uh, I guess you would call it meditational or devotional music of some kind, although I don't use it as such. But um, I just thought that would be a really cool thing to put in the middle of the album, and topically, things start to get pretty heavy after that.
Yeah.
So it's maybe just a it serves as as an intermission, but also a really cool uh, vocal performance. So
That's exactly how I took it. I took it as, this album to me is all about dualities. Like you have Son of War and then Son of War. The whole record. That's why I say the record to me felt like it's two halves, but it's all about dualities between one half and the other. And having that track in the middle was such a creative way of breaking down the record. Like I said, when I was listening to the album, I'm like, oh, you know what? They're gonna throw like an instrumental track here in the middle, like a little intermission, a little bridge track, and that's what I was thinking where the record was going to go. You guys throw me that vocal track in below, and I was like, holy shit! Like this album it's just like there's two dimensions. There's the regular dimension of what you would expect from a regular album, and then there's you guys flipping that over and creating your own dimension, your own take, where things sometimes come in upside down and they're not in the place where you would expect it to be.
yeah,
So that's why I had to ask you about that track, because to me it's just something that you don't see every day. It's super creative, really well put together.
thanks, man. Yeah, you know, like I said, I just it again starting simple. It was just like, wow, James, that sounds cool. you
Let's
know,
put that on the record.
yeah, yeah.
I like that way of thinking. Another song that to me it's perhaps it's my favorite on the record. I'm not going to say it's the best track on the album because that's always very subjective to the listener,
Sure.
but it's definitely my favorite track on the album, and that is "Death Comes in Reverse." What a song! Like wow, what a track! Uh, where does this song rank for you on this record?
I think, um, I mean, I think that was so when we started writing, Nick and I, we had the first two songs that we wrote for the record were "Death Comes in Reverse" and "Years in Frigid Light," and we recorded those as demos, just sort of shop to labels, because we, like I said before, we had no team and we weren't sure if we were going to get one. But I remember James came up. Man, this would have been maybe November of 2017. James came to Pennsylvania from Indiana over to Pennsylvania, and we recorded his vocals for those. That was a long time ago, man. But so those were the first two tracks that we did, and I mean, "Death Comes in Reverse" is a cool one for me. I enjoy it. I think it seems like the type of song that will be really cool to play live,
Mm-hmm.
but also it was sort of an experiment in simplicity too. But that's the thing, is like I am a big fan of keeping things as simple as possible, and really, that song is based on one idea, one guitar idea, and it modulates through two different keys and whatever else, but it's just one idea. And I feel like my dad who is like my dad's a metalhead, and he's obviously a big fan of or a big supporter of the band and a big fan of the band. He also says that that's his favorite track, but I think it's maybe a sleeper track on the album. It will be our next single. It comes out this Friday, so we'll see how people react to it. I hope they like it. I mean, I think fans of our band will like it. Um, but it's it's weird. It's a very subtle song for me because it literally is one idea.
I find it interesting that you're saying that it all starts from a very simple idea, simple. And when I'm listening to the album, I'm like, this album is anything but simple. It's like, so it's really interesting to hear you say that because it may start as a simple idea. It may feel simple to you as the
Mhm.
person who's creating it, but definitely for me as the listener, it's nothing simple at all. It just seems so interlayered, so interconnected with so many different pieces in it that, like I said, the whole album is like that. I mean, I find the album just one of the best albums I heard this year. It's not one of those records that you can pick up any other day that any other band throws out there. It just feels like it's a record that just has so much to offer and it will continue to offer. So when you talk about a song like that being simple, I find that super interesting because I didn't get that vibe listening to it, and every time that I listen to it, I still don't get that vibe. So it's
I'm
just
doing
interesting to see.
I'm doing my job then.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely making things work. And if starting simple is where it needs to be in order to get to this point, then you're on the right track.
Well, yeah. I mean, it just starts with an idea, and I'm already once I figure out where I'm going, especially lyrically, um, I'm off. And I think I've already figured that out for the next album as well. So I'm excited for that too. But once I pick my lane, because that's the thing is, and it's the same with the world. There's so many options. Once you pick one and you go there, then you can get some work done. Otherwise, you can spend your entire life overcome by options.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And with this record, do you feel like there were? I'm sure with every album, there's something you learn. There's always a learning experience with every single record because obviously every record has a different experience, has a different baggage that
Sure.
comes with it. Is there anything that you take from this album into the next record? That's something that you learn new, or a challenge that you faced that you hadn't faced before that you feel like perhaps is making you a better musician as you go into the next album afterwards?
I don't know about musician wise. I mean, I try to practice the things that I do as much as I can and stay as good as them as I stay as good at them as I can. Uh, but for me, this record was like a bookmark uh, and a closing of a chapter in my life uh, personally, and it took 33 years to get there. And I think that's maybe why the record comes off as so heavy, uh, emotionally, maybe because it is, and it was for me. Um, so I'm excited for it to come out because I feel like I've let go of a lot of things with it, and I look forward to the next one because it really, I mean, people have been talking about this record being a new chapter in their career, and in a lot of ways it is, clearly. But I think uh, the next album is just going to be a completely fresh start for me. Uh, I don't really like the word creatively because I don't know if that's what it is. I think it's more receptivity uh, and openness to things that are already there. Um, but it's a fresh start for me, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, you got to exercise some demons with this one.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and it comes across in the music and in the vocals and in the lyrics, and I think that's one of the reasons why from this album. And I know this sounds like a super cliche, but I really feel like this is the best album you guys have released. It's just it has all of these different components that just seems like the perfect storm, and everything kind of collided at the same time in the perfect place, and that's what allows this album to be what it is. I know, like I said, I know this is a cliche, but how do you feel about this record overall? Do you feel it is is the strongest album you guys released?
Absolutely. In fact, it's the first album that we've released that I can honestly say that I have no stylistic regrets on. Uh, you know, we were very mindful of composition, and I feel like in the past I've been guilty of, I don't know, like, hey buddy, maybe you didn't need to repeat that part again, you know, and so we were very conscious with that this time. So I absolutely think it's our best album, and I also think it's our most concise album, which is interesting because it has our longest songs of any album. But I feel like the composition and adding Ethan to the band, uh, and just growing as composers, all of us we're composers. That sounds like we're real musicians, but songwriters. Uh, yeah, it's just it is our best album. I think, yeah. To answer your question.
I'm going to be, since we're being honest with each other, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time that I heard the album, I didn't like it. And this was my attitude. I don't think it's the album. I think it's me. Like I'm being 100% honest with you. After listening to the album for the first time, I'm like, something here, I don't like it, but I don't think it's the record. I honestly think it's me. I don't think I'm listening to the album properly. I don't think I'm giving the record the time, the attention that it requires. And that was my mindset, because I was like, at the end of the album, this album cannot be what I think it is in my mind right now. And then I went back and I listened to the album in a quiet room, just me with the record playing. And I was like, yes, I was right. It's definitely not the album. This is one of those that it's not you, it's me. And it was definitely me. It was definitely me, because the more I listened to it, the more I realized how wrong I was in that first time going through it. So I really believe this is one album that you can't consume it as fast food.
Yeah.
You really have to take your time as a meal, like as
Yeah.
Thanksgiving with your family. You know what I mean? Like, you got to sit down and.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because my favorite heavy band of all time, well, I don't know, one of my favorite heavy bands of all time is Meshuggah. And the first time that I heard Chaosphere, when I was a much younger man, I hated it, and but I had that same thought process that you had. I was like, I know that this is awesome, and I'm not getting it. I just played Chaosphere over and over and over for about 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, I said, okay, I have, I don't know if you can see, but I have
Yeah.
Zen tattooed on my arm here. I love that band. But but it's interesting, your listening experience. I mean, that's a compliment to me.
Yeah, and I don't want you to take it as a bad thing, because
No, I don't.
it was just a really strange experience for me, because I listened to the album and my son asked me, "So, Dad, what do you think of the record? I know you're getting ready to do a review, recording a review for the channel. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Man, I don't like it, but I don't think it's the album. I really got to listen to it. I honestly feel, and this doesn't happen very often, but I honestly felt that it was really me. I was just not ready for what you guys were giving me. So,
Man, that's a compliment to me, because like I said, I've had that I've had that experience, and I've read about other people having that experience. I read John McLaughlin, the guitar player from Mahavishnu Orchestra, the jazz fusion guitar player. He describes the first time he heard John Coltrane as being that way, and I think that's a phenomenon, because I mean, if you write an album that takes, that album took us like 3 years to finish. If someone wants to sit down with it for whatever, 50 minutes, however long the album is,
yeah.
one time, and decide they don't like it, I mean, that's fine, but probably didn't get everything in there. I mean, it's weird because, you know, you have that happen when you get bad reviews. Sometimes you think, I mean, not that some people just legitimately don't like it, and some people legitimately will think it's a bad album, and that's okay. But you know, it's like my girlfriend works at a brewery, and people will leave reviews that say things to the effect of, I don't like imperial stouts. This imperial stout was horrible. Well, you don't like imperial stouts, so why'd you review an imperial stout? Go drink something you like. You know, and I think that's the same, you know, it's difficult, but I think, and that's like real music listeners, and I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying that there's not legitimacy to not enjoying our album. That's fine. But real music listeners, sometimes it does take work. I mean, you know, back to Meshuggah, it's like if you listen to that, if you listen to one of their albums and you think you got it in 50 minutes, you didn't. You know what I mean? So
I
yeah,
agree with you. I think it all comes down to the band and the work that whoever the band is putting together.
sure,
Some bands create a record that you can listen in whatever the duration of the record is, and you immediately at the end of the record have an opinion about it because there's not much to it. It's almost like watching a Will Ferrell comedy. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, 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 yeah,
there's no subliminal messages there. I mean, you're
right.
getting what you paid for.
Yeah, you're
That's
getting
plain
poop
and
jokes.
simple. Yeah, but then if you watch like a Stanley Kubrick movie, it's
Oh
a
yeah,
different experience. You know what I mean? So you may not like it the first time around just because it went over your head. It's not that the movie's not well done. It's just that it went over your head. Oh, and like you said, some people may not like it because it's not for them. They want a simple experience.
right.
So I think it comes down to who's listening and to who's making the art that you're listening to, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
I think it's a combination of those factors. I just thought it was interesting because I've never had this experience before with a record, and,
Yeah.
and that's why I say that this is one of the best records I heard this year because it gave me something new. It brought something new that I have never experienced before. I had never had that feeling of not liking an album and
Right.
not feeling like and feeling like it was my fault, not the record's fault, right? So you know, so to me, this was like I felt completely out of touch. Like I
Yeah.
didn't feel it gave me a different sensation. And then once I finally connected with the album, then I was like, okay, I was able to understand why I thought what I did that first time around, and that to me it helped me engage with the record much better later on.
Well, I certainly appreciate the fact that you did. I mean, I think that's great.
Well, I think you guys did a phenomenal job, and this album just really deserves all the accolades that I believe, in my opinion, is going to get.
I
Uh,
hope so.
but oh yeah, I honestly I like I said, it's one of those records that's really hard to put into words. I already recorded the review for the album. I haven't posted it yet, but I recorded it, and I had a difficult time explaining to other people what the record meant to me as the listener. I really had a hard time. It's a really hard record for me to. It's an album that I almost want to sit with you. Like if you've never listened to the album before, I want to sit with you and guide you through how it felt to me when I was listening to, almost giving you like a director's cut.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean?
Yep,
But
yep.
but it's hard for me to sit down and explain to you before you ever listen to it. What does it mean to me? Like how did it
Yeah.
impact me? Because it's just hard to put it into words.
It's definitely a watershed moment for us, you know. And I it's as it gets closer and closer to coming out and being in the world that we are now, which is a weird one. Um, I I I feel like in a lot of ways it set me free to do what we're gonna do next, which I look forward to as well. But you know, yeah, it's an important piece of our history. Perhaps the most well. I mean, the EP obviously, you know, did what it did for us. But I mean, I think if you want to look, you know, at chapters of our career, that you know, you basically have the EP and Violent Portraits of Doomed Escape. Really, that's the way it feels anyway.
And that takes me to the last question I have for you is with the state of the world the way it is, with all the uncertainty that it's happening, the virus, everything else in the world, you guys are releasing, which we already both of us agree, and I'm sure the world will agree, this is the best album you guys have released. How does that impact you guys and how you promote this album? Were you concerned with releasing it at now? But I mean, what other options did you have, and how do you go forward with it?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, any band that's putting out an album right now, is it's tough. I mean, you don't get to generate more sales being on the road. You don't get to promote the album being on the road. You don't get to generate more sales by performing live for people. I mean, it's tough. On the other hand, more people are at home spending time with things like music. Um, so, obviously we had discussed maybe pushing the release back, but what are we going to push the release back indefinitely? I mean, when, you know, particularly down here in the States, man, I don't know when this stuff's going to subside. Um, so, we decided to just go ahead and do it. And, we're not alone. There's a lot of bands that are releasing albums right now during this time period. And the other side of that is maybe in our own little way, we can help, with all the pain and negativity that's going around by, maybe putting out something that somehow makes people feel better or something.
A little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, if you will.
Yeah, you should always look for that.
I think this album will do that for not only the fans of the band, but I think this is going to be one of those records that you're not only going to reach out to your fans and give them something to be hopeful for. I think you're going to bring a whole new legion of fans into the mix, because it's one of those albums that that has that capability to really open the doors for the band to have a much even larger audience base.
That would be delightful.
Hey, I'm doing my part, which is spreading the love, about this wonderful record. Like, so I'm hoping everybody else feels the same way as I do, because if there's one thing that I don't think anybody can deny after listening to this album is how much work you guys put into it. It's painfully obvious with every single track.
Well, I appreciate that, because it definitely was hard work. But again, what is that quote? If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was hard work, but it wasn't work. It was fun.
Well, I'm glad you guys took your time and you did what you did, and I want to thank you not only for putting this album together, but I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat with me about the record.
Oh, of course, man, and thank you for taking your time with the album.
I'm glad you're not mad at me for being a dumbass and not liking the album at the first time around.
Dude, I've been there. I've been there. Like I said, I completely understand that. Like, what did I just hear? And then, like I said, the first time I heard Meshuggah, I thought, well, this is my brain not getting something.
Yeah, that's how I felt, especially when I heard Below. I was like, what's happening right now around here? Like, this is not conventional. Like, somebody here threw everything out of the window and then decided to reinvent the wheel, but now the wheel is just like completely different. It has like spinner rims and all sorts of stuff in it. So I was blown away.
I hope to have spinner rims on my car someday. So
at these days, it's even hard to afford the car. Never mind the rims.
Oh, so, I know. I deliver pizzas. I put like 100 miles on my car every day.
So you know the pain and suffering that it is. It's a tough world.
Oh yeah, but we do what we can.
Well, and I hope that this whole virus thing clears up soon, and we see you guys up in Toronto again. I know you guys were here not too long ago on a tour, but with a new album, I'm definitely dying to hear some of these songs in a live setting, because I think this album is going to resonate so good in a live setting.
I do too. I really look forward to that. And I don't know if you drink beer, but if you do, I'll buy you a beer in Toronto.
No. I'll buy you a beer.
I'll
buy you a beer.
I'll buy you a beer. You buy me a beer.
All right, so let's do this. You'll buy the beers, and I'll bring some donuts.
That sounds great.
You know, I was going to say pizza, but since you do that for a living, I mean, that's the last thing you want to see as a pizza.
I'm drowning in pizza, my man.
I'll bring you some Canadian donuts, some really old-fashioned Canadian donuts to the show.
I'm into that.
All right, we have a deal. You buy the beer, I'll bring the donuts.
Fuck yeah.
All right, we'll see you in Toronto, man. Thanks
I'll
for your
talk to
time.
you soon, bro.